Hi, Rob. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. This is probably the closest we can get during the pandemic.
I think so, but at least we don't need to wear a mask there's no virtual transmission yet.
That's right. That's right. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and being interviewed on the Training Master series. Thank you very much.
I'm glad to do it. Thank you for doing this. I think you're making a very important contribution, and I admire your ethic and work ethic for doing this. Terrific.
Thank you. Thank you for your support and encouragement, sir. For our audience, would you like to please introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us a little bit about your background,
Sure.
where you went to college, you were brought up, and what you studied, and where you work now. Or
Yeah, we're happy to. Well, I was born and raised on the East Coast of the United States in Massachusetts and Connecticut.
Yeah.
I went to college at a small college in upstate New York called Colgate University. Very small, only 1,200 students in total, men only, very cold, lots of snow on the ground. So, and then when I graduated from there in 1964, this was when the conscription and the draft was getting very strong in the United States because of the war in Vietnam. So I applied to officer candidate school in the US Navy. And I went to officer candidate school. So then I served 5 years in the United States Navy. And that actually, I didn't realize it, but at the time, as I look back now, I learned a lot of things about training that I wasn't aware of the fact that I was learning. So anyway, 5 years in the Navy. And then when I got out of the Navy, I joined the anti-war movement and was very strongly opposed to the war in Vietnam, and in fact so opposed to it that I was married at the time. In my first marriage, my wife and I decided to leave the United States. We were very tired of all the violence of the war, and I moved to Barbados, a peaceful little island in the West Indies, and I spent a couple of years there running a fishing boat. But then I sort of came back to my professional senses and moved back to the US, and I used the GI Bill to go to university. So I went to University of Virginia and I studied program evaluation. And then I stayed on there as a faculty member until 1978. I met my new wife, my second wife, and we've been married for 42 years and have a bunch of children and all. So we moved from Virginia to Michigan, to Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I'd never heard of Kalamazoo. I didn't think it was a real place. But I was recruited to the university here, Western Michigan University. So I directed a graduate program in human resources development and began to do my consulting work in evaluation and training. So I've retired from the university, but I'm still working. I'm working with a company in Stockholm, Sweden, that is designing a virtual learning platform for doing high impact learning. So 55 years in training and development. So if anything, I've been around a long time. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Your name, you have generated a lot of impact for the learning development field globally, actually. And a lot of people, I know that my friends, professional friends, and also like friends as well, in the United States, in China, a lot of, especially in the United States, they have read you. We all read about your books and your publications. Especially, there's a book called High Impact Learning.
Yes.
In 2001. High Impact Learning.
Yes. Yeah.
Was a classic. A lot of us really liked it. Actually, as a matter of fact, I remember this book was given to me by a friend from Sweden, from Ericsson. I was working for Ericsson at that time.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah. And are you originally from Sweden?
No. Actually, my family moved from the Netherlands to the United States in the year 1642. So my family's been in the United States for over 300 years. So
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But right now you have somebody working with there.
Yes, I've done quite a bit of work in Sweden and Denmark and the Netherlands. Yeah. And
right.
I'm glad you brought up that book, because that's the work I think that I am most proud of, and that I think I'm still thinking about how to make that better. You know.
Thank you. This is really, really already a very, very good. But there's a lot of contents in it, and you cover a lot of things. By the way, the
Yeah.
name of the friend that gave to me that's book to me, his first name is Lars,
Okay.
Lars. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know him more now, but he's in the field as well for so many years, and he recommended and read about it and loved it.
Oh, good. I'm glad he did that.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And so we'll start from the title, high
Sure.
impact learning.
Yeah.
High impact learning is not only a model, it's not only the title of your book, but also a model that you created. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as I said, I did my doctoral work in program evaluation, and I spent probably 15, almost 20 years still doing what I do, which is evaluating training programs. But my focus then was all about evaluation and measurement. And I was working mostly in Washington, D.C. on U.S. government programs, but we were evaluating training in healthcare, in industry, in military, defense industries, evaluated training programs all around the globe. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and what we discovered is what most people know already, is that most training doesn't work. You know, that
That's something new.
no, nothing new, but that we were spending billions of dollars on training and development, trying to change behavior, but
Right.
most training wasn't having an impact. Um, so I decided I spent a sabbatical from the university in the early 1980s at the Upjohn Company, which happens to be headquartered here in Kalamazoo. It no longer exists. It's now was bought by Pfizer, pharmaceutical company, but the
Okay.
Upjohn Company, a very large pharmaceutical company. And I spent 1 year working in their learning center. And I
Mhm.
wanted to take everything I'd learned about evaluation of training and see if I could apply it in the corporate world. And of course, what I discovered was that most of the training, even though they were doing some of the best training in the industry, most of it wasn't working. So I wanted to take everything I'd learned in evaluation about why training doesn't work and see if I could build a model for, if we wanted training to work all the time, how would we do it? Our research showed over the decades that for about every 100 people you put through training, about 15 to 20 of them will actually take what they learned and use it in their work. The other 80% just don't get around to using it. And that's a terrible impact rate. And of course, I had done training in the United States Navy and in submarine warfare, where training had to work for everybody. If we were training people how to disarm a torpedo, a live torpedo, that if it exploded would kill everybody on the submarine. Well, we were training them how to disarm that. We couldn't afford an impact rate of 15%. We had to have it much better. So that was the genesis of high impact learning. Was I wanted to see, why doesn't training work any better than it does, and what would we have to do to make it work? And I'll tell you a quick story, because it was quite interesting. I was introduced to Blanchard, Ken Blanchard's company, Situational Leadership. And Ken Blanchard he and I we hit it off right away together, and he got very interested in my evaluating training programs, because he wanted to do better with situational leadership. So we had a contract with the Blanchard Company to go into different companies where they were running situational leadership program and evaluate the impact. And we defined impact as whether people were using their situational leadership learning in their work in a way that was being productive to their company. So what we found was that we could go into one company that was using situational leadership and getting almost no results at all, and go into another company a month later that had been using situational leadership, and they were getting fantastic results. And even in the same company, we would find In one business unit, they were doing situational leadership and getting great results. Another business unit using it to the training and not using it at all. So what we found was that this was exactly the same program being used over and over again, exactly the same facilitators, exactly the same materials, exactly the same content. But in one place it got results and another it didn't. So we began to say, gosh, if you're holding treatment constant, but you're getting different results all the time, something else is going on. And so that was what drove us to ask, so if it's working in this company, but not working in this company, and the companies are essentially the same, what's the difference? And that led us to discover that the difference in impact was not due to the training itself. It was due to what happened before the training and due to what happened after the training. So for example, if a company was making sure that managers were engaged with the training participants, that they began to get much better results than companies where there was no manager engagement. So that was the discovery, the fact that the same program was getting wildly different results. So then we decided to conduct an experiment at the Upjohn Company, and this was really quite fascinating. The Upjohn Company had a corporate learning center, like many training companies did, and hundreds and hundreds of employees went through that corporate training center every year, taking management courses, taking supervision courses, taking soft skills, taking listening courses, and so forth. So we decided to conduct an experiment. So for 6 months of operation of this learning center, over 6 months, about 1,500 people would have gone through one training program or another. So we randomly assigned people who, as they signed up for training, some of them, half of them, we asked their manager, and we trained their manager and gave them, the manager, a tool for doing this, to just have a 15-minute dialogue with the participant before that participant went to training, and meet with them after the 3-day workshop and have another 15-minute dialogue. And in that dialogue, we wanted them to talk about, so if you were going and I were your manager, George, I would say, George, let's talk for a few minutes. You're going to go to situational leadership next week, and you're going to love it. It's good stuff. But what I want to talk to you about is, how are you going to use it when you come back? Let's talk about where you're going to have an opportunity to use it, because I want you to use it, and I want to make sure that you get good results from it, because I believe it's a worthwhile investment. So managers would have that. We wanted them to have that discussion before and after. So we randomly divided. Half the people got just a memorandum from their manager saying, hey, glad you're going to training, enjoy it, have a good time. But the others, the manager was instructed to have this 15-minute before training and 15-minute after training dialogue. So, and then we measured the transfer of training for everybody. And at first our results were very discouraging, because what we found, the difference between the experimental group and the difference between the control group, there was no difference. The transfer rate was about the same. And so that was very discouraging, because it flew in the face of what we thought we knew, that this manager dialogue would make a difference. But then we made an important discovery. Fortunately, when we designed this research, we also asked the participants, did you have a meeting with your manager before the training? And did you have a meeting with your manager after the training? So we knew who had the dialogue and who didn't have the dialogue. Well, what we found was in the experimental group, where we trained the managers to have the dialogue, only 20% of the managers really did have the dialogue. The other 20% said they would, but they never did. And in some of the experimental group, some of the managers, even though we didn't teach them how to do it and ask them to do it, they had the dialogue with people. So we now reformulated the data to compare the people who had the manager dialogue before and after against those who didn't, who actually had it, and those who didn't. And we found that tremendous impact. In fact, the group, the people who had the dialogue, were 70% more likely to use their training in their job place.
70.
70%. So it was a huge difference that manager dialogue accounted for about 70% of the variance in whether people got results or not. So we learned two things from that. One we learned was that managers, even though you teach them to do something, and even though they say they'll do it, they still, many of them don't.
Oh, right.
And the second thing we learned was when they do have that dialogue, it makes a dramatic impact. So that was the beginning then of high impact learning. Because what we then said was, well, knowing that these before and after dialogues make such a big difference, how can we get this to happen consistently? So that we started building tools and methods for making sure that before and after things began to happen. And as we did that, and we would go to different companies all around the globe and teach them and how to have these dialogues. And then we would do some follow-up training. And what we learned was it was very difficult to change the culture in an organization, that most organizations looked at training as if it were just a staff benefit. That, it's like, oh, this is a good company to work for, George. We give you a place to park your car. We have a nice cafeteria with a 4-star chef. We give you good insurance coverage, even for your family. Oh, and by the way, we have excellent training. Excellent training too. You're really going to love it here. So the expectation for training in most companies is that it shouldn't and won't make a difference. And unfortunately, all the evaluation models up to date were reinforcing that, because what did we measure in training? Whether people enjoyed it or not. That was all we measured. So the high impact learning requires a change in the culture of training in an organization to raise the expectation, to say, no, we don't do this training just because we want you to enjoy your work here. That's part of why we do it, of course. And we know that we couldn't recruit good employees if we didn't have good training. But some of the training we do, we know is crucial to our ability to execute our strategy. And thus, we don't just expect results from training, we demand results from training. And that's a very difficult culture shift to make. But that's what high impact learning is all about. And what we learned, it is not rocket science. If we want training to work all the time, we know exactly what you need to do. You need to have learners who expect to be held accountable for applying their training. You need managers who support them and provide them coaching and feedback. You need the managers of the managers to hold those managers accountable for supporting their trainees. When those conditions are in place, training works. Where they're not in place, it doesn't. It's just a very simple formula. But getting it to work is the challenge.
Yeah. I concur a lot with what you said, especially on the systematic part. What you describe to us, HIL is basically a systematic engineering of all the learning before, during, and after. All training, learning activities happens. Especially what you emphasized is before learning happens and after learning happens, something must be there. For instance, before is that you have the manager's dialogue, you have the learning expectations and intentionality, and then during, of course, the training design kicks in. That each has the cycle.
Well, you have to manage it. You're so right, George, and you used exactly the right word. You have to engineer the process. And really, I had studied a lot about Japanese manufacturing methods and quality control and managing the process. And what we realized, the only part of the process we were managing was the delivery of the training. We weren't managing the results of the training. So that's exactly the right way to look at it. Listen, we conducted one of my doctoral students conducted an experiment. I won't name the company, but I live just 45 miles away from Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is the global headquarters of the furniture manufacturing industry. You have Steelcase is there, Herman Miller is there, the biggest companies. Well, we had a doctoral student go to one of those companies and
Mm-hmm.
spend about 2 months just
Mm-hmm.
sitting in the learning center. And as
Mm-hmm.
people started to come in to go to training, we
Mm-hmm.
would say, excuse me, George, do you have just a minute? I'd like to just ask you where you're going today.
Uh-huh.
And what we heard from people,
Uh-huh.
90% of the time, I said,
Uh-huh.
so where are you going today? Oh, I'm going to training.
Uh-huh.
And tell me, why are you going? Why am I going? Well,
Uh-huh.
oh, because you see, I have a email here from my manager says
Manager.
I'm signed up for it. So if you're signed up for it, you go to it. And I said, and what do you expect to get from it? Well, I don't. What do you mean? What do I expect to get from it? I'm supposed to be there. And they didn't even know what we were talking about. So more than 90% of the people, when asked why they were going to training,
Right.
said, because I'm signed up for it. That's why I'm going.
Yeah.
And some of them even got quite concerned. Would say, where are you going? Well, I'm going to training. And why are you going? Oh, God, why am I going? Today's Tuesday, isn't it? Did I make a mistake and come on the wrong day? Oh, no, that happened to me a month ago. I signed up for it and I went on the wrong day. Why are you asking me this? They said, calm down, calm down. Just,
Right.
you're signed up for it. I know that. I'm just curious why
Right.
you're going. Yeah. So with that level of expectation, the level of expectation is only that people will attend the training and they will
Right.
participate. And they'll
Right.
be good participants. You know, they'll smile, they'll nod, they'll stay awake. They won't do
Yeah.
email during the session. That's
Right.
the only expectation. So the results we get are what we expect.
Mm-hmm.
And unless we expect something different, we're never going to get different results. So high impact learning is about raising expectations of companies and saying, when your training has to work because you're betting the business on the training working, it's like McDonald's Corporation. They bet their business on their
Right.
ability to train employees to get a hamburger in the bag the way you ordered it in less than 30 seconds. And
Right. Right.
you've got to train people to do that. That's their business model. If their training doesn't work, they're out of business. So when you're
I
serious about training, you have to manage it as a process. Uh,
right.
so when you're betting the business on the training, that's when you need high impact learning. Otherwise, it's going to fail.
I remember Ray. That was that McDonald founder, Ray Kroc.
Yes.
Yeah, he was doing that from the McDonald brothers. That they deliver everything within 30 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're taking minimum wage people without much education, you have
Right.
to have a process in place to train them, and then of course to measure their performance so you're getting constant feedback. Because training alone will never make a difference anywhere. If training isn't integrated with the performance management system, don't expect any results.
Exactly. I agree with you all of it, especially just now to adding to what you already said. Training is not a fringe benefit. It's not. It's not a benefit. You know,
Yeah.
it's a business, and it's a business. Do you
Yeah.
agree? I mean, I would I would say it's a strict business. I mean, it's a part of the business operation. Is not cost saving. It's not cost center, but it's part of the business operation.
Yes.
And when you invest, you need to get something out of it. Otherwise, don't invest, don't train.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
You know, George, what you're saying is that training is not a fringe benefit. I would take a little bit of an issue with that in that some training is intended to be a fringe benefit.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, we make it like we provide you with health and fitness training if it's available. So what I think learning and development practitioners need to understand is that they are managing a portfolio of learning.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
some kinds of learning has a different value proposition. So
Right.
some of our learning is intended to be a staff benefit. We don't really care if it makes a difference. What we want it to do is be available to people so we can recruit and retain. There's also some training that we don't want people ever to use. And imagine, so we say, well, the goal of training is transfer, to get people to use their training in their work. Well, wait a minute. What about, here's a little question for you. I found a company that spends $400 million a year on training.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been running this training program for 10 years. And I've yet to find one person who uses this training in their work. Now, so I said, what's going on? How do we get this training to have an impact? But here's the thing, that industry was the airline industry.
Okay.
The training they were providing was how do you land a fully loaded 707 aircraft with the wheels up when the landing gear won't come down? How do you land that? You don't want your pilots. If your pilots are using that training every day, you're out of business already. I mean, we don't want them landing the aircraft without any landing gear. So some training is meant to have, it's meant to give people the capability to act in an emergency, like pilot Sully Sullenberger did when he put that plane down in the Hudson River.
Oh, Sully?
Sully, he was trained to do that, but he didn't have to do that training every day. We didn't expect that training to be used on a daily basis. So what people have to recognize is you have a portfolio of learning and development, and it is full of programs and interventions that have different value propositions. So like the value proposition of some training is career development. I don't expect you to use it tomorrow. I expect you to use it when you get promoted. I expect you to be ready to use it when we need you. But then there's that there's that part of your portfolio at the top of the pyramid that is training that is meant to drive execution of new strategy. So training that is meant to change behavior. Now that's the training that has to work. It's also the training that is least likely to work because it's teaching people to do something different from what they're already doing. And so we really need to differentiate our learning and development portfolio. Right now, they lump all training as training. And we use a common method, we'll use a Kirkpatrick method or whatever. We'll treat it all the same. That's exactly the wrong way to go about it.
Right. It looks like under different occasions that the word training or learning or development and should be strictly defined or redefined.
Yeah.
Well, like just what we talk now. I absolutely agree with you that if you look at learning development as a whole, as an employee, part of the employee development as a portfolio. Yes. Of course, their physical training, physical well-beings, and everything should be part of the so-called training as well.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
But on-the-job skills and performance, performance-related behavior change. Those are from non-acquisition to the acquirement to retaining. Yes. Those are behaviors, not only cognitively, but through what I call the psychomotor domain, right?
That's right. Yes.
And then everything should be the purpose of all the learning activities that we talk about just now, and also something that mentioned defined in the book.
Yeah.
As well.
So high impact learning, we would expect that a learning and development organization like Ford Motor Company or General Motors or Ericsson, they're only going to use high impact learning with about 15% of their portfolio, but they're going to use it in the part of the portfolio that is make or break for the company's success. So what we say about high impact learning is like an American Express card. Don't leave home without it. If you need the training to work, you don't have a choice but to use high impact learning. Because you have to change the expectations and the accountabilities around. When the focus is behavior change, then it's a whole new ballgame. And that's where you need high impact learning, and you must integrate it then with the performance management systems.
Just now, you also mentioned establish learner expectations. At the very beginning, and through the manager's dialogue, and does that anything to do with the internationality that you mentioned, that you created that word, I think, for the
intentionality. Yeah, that used to underline in red all the time because it was a misspelled word. Learner intentionality, and what we mean by learner intentionality is let me just role play with you for 1 minute, an intentional learner. You just asked me, George, just imagine you've just met me and I'm on my way to training in the Learning Center, and you ask me where I'm going and why I'm going.
Right, right. So where are you going? Why are you going?
I'm going to training today, George.
Okay, why are you going to training
Why are
today?
you going? Do you have a minute? I'll be happy to explain.
Oh, sure.
Sure. Okay. Well, you probably know as well as I do that everything here in the company is all about growing our market share with our preferred customer base. But that's where our profits lie. I mean, and everybody knows we've got to figure out how to do that better as a company. Well,
Okay.
actually, in my unit, and I've been talking with my manager about it, is we need to ask the question: how does our unit contribute to customer satisfaction and maintenance of market share? And what we realize, I'm in the area that manages resubscription of our technology services. So my job is to get our customers to resubscribe to our service every year, our data protection services. And what we know is that if I can't make a good business case to each of our customers as to how our service will help their business, they're not likely to renew their subscription. So why I'm going to this training today is this training is all about how do we analyze our customers' business needs. And what I need to learn to do is I manage different teams of people, and I learned that I have to learn how can I manage each team individually to be able to analyze their customers' business needs and then address proposals to them. So this training really has two parts. One is how do you manage a team, and how do you get a team to analyze customer business needs? And so that's why I'm going. I'm held accountable for getting that resubscription rate up 15% this year. And this training should really help me do that. So that's why I'm going.
Wow, 15%. Well, sounds terrific. Can I go with you too?
Yeah, yeah. So that's an example of an intentional learner. And notice, I didn't tell you what I'm expecting to learn. I told you why I'm expecting to learn it and how my boss expects me to use it.
Right.
So,
benefit.
in other words, the focus was changed from learning to performance. So now most people will say, well, why are you going to training? Oh, I'm going to go to training today to become a better listener. Well, Rob, when and where and why do you need to listen? Oh, everybody needs to listen. We all need to listen better. So if I listen better, I'll do better in my work, and listening is an important skill, and I hope to learn that skill today. But I couldn't. In other words, that person,
right.
What people have to be able to do, if you ask trainees at the end of training, say, now that you've been to this training, what are you going to be doing differently next week and next month? If people can't answer that question, the training doesn't have a chance of making a difference.
Exactly.
That's the intentional learner.
That's terrific. But how do we get there?
Yeah, that's the question. Well, the first thing that it takes a village to get training impact. You can't just expect the learning and development function to be able to be held accountable for getting impact from training. The whole organization is accountable for getting impact from training. So managers have a role to play. The bosses of those managers have a role to play. Senior leadership has a role to play. Trainees have a role to play, and learning and development has a role to play. So each of those people have to know what are they expected to do to make this training work. So managers know that if I'm your manager, George, and you're going to some mission critical training, I know that I have to make clear to you what my expectations for your performance will be when you come back from this training. That's my job. And I have to also then be expected to provide you coaching and feedback when you're back from the training. And my manager needs to hold me accountable for doing that. So how do we do that? We have to, and this is where evaluation comes into play. High impact learning cannot be executed without evaluation. Most organizations don't know how to get results from training. They don't understand that they think that we can just send people to good training and we'll automatically get results. They
Right.
don't understand that it has to be managed as a process.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things we have to do is we have to use evaluation to teach the organization
Mm-hmm.
how to get results from training.
Right.
And so I always say the mission of a learning and development department is not to do great training, but the mission of the development department is to help their organization get great results from the training they do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Mm-hmm.
not about doing great training, it's about helping your company get great results from the training you do.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a learning mission in and of itself, because most managers, if you say, what's your role in getting training done? They'll say, well, I have to make sure I provide opportunities for my people to go to training. I have to make sure that I cover their work job, their work while they're at training.
Mm-hmm.
That's my responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Most managers define, and we've done research on that, when we say to a manager, what are your responsibilities for making training work? And they'll say, making sure that I give people permission to go and that I make them available to go to training.
Mm-hmm.
Managers define support for training as permission to go.
Mm-hmm.
Got to change that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, what you have described is so common, including the role play that we
Yeah.
just did. That is so typical. As you described earlier, when you ask anybody, excuse me, why are you going training? Oh, I got an email my manager sent me, and I got to go. Oh, is that Tuesday, or do I mess up? Did I mess up with time? And then they kind of, and then they became scared. But
Yes.
that's so common. It's not only the United States, not only Sweden. It's China. It's
common.
everywhere.
It's
Korea,
common globally.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, globally.
And some cultures it's different. Some, I think,
Mm-hmm.
some cultures where there's been sort of a reverence for education and a reverence for teachers, we're less likely to see training having an impact and making a difference, because people have been sort of culturally raised to be a good student, which is to
Right.
pay attention, to be friendly, to be supportive, but they never felt that they're accountable for actually doing something with the learning.
Especially in the Eastern cultures, as myself, I was brought up, Chinese schools. We were like the Confucius, 1,000 years of teaching style.
Yes.
The ILT, the instructor-led training, and you should respect your teacher.
Yeah.
And when your teacher comes in, and you stand up and say hello, greeting the teacher, and then you sit down and sit back with your hands on the back. And then,
Yeah.
well, 45 minutes until the bell rings.
Yes.
So that's what we were brought up in the grade schools, and so that's the Eastern culture and Western culture a little bit different, but
Yeah, but you're right, a lot of similarities. And unfortunately, that whole classroom mentality, the mental model of training, is something that happens in a classroom, not that happens during work.
It does. When adults they're in the organizations, and they are expected to perform, and then they need to create impact. And when they learn, you said it should be high impact learning. And then you also mentioned in your book, actually you cited a chart, the financial advisors, the impact map. So how do we create an impact map? Because that's so critical for creating impact, because it's kind of a focus down to what exactly needs to versus the unit business goals to increase the acquisition of new customers and key results and critical actions. And the critical actions is book new appointments, so on and so forth. So how do we
Well, yeah, that's a great, and the impact map was a tool that we discovered when we began to work with managers, because managers would say, well, I don't know I don't know what this training's about, so how can I have a dialogue with my trainee about how they're expected to use it? I don't even know how they'd be expected to use it because I don't even know what this training is about. I just know I've been asked to let them go to it. So what we began to do is we began to teach the learning and development department how to create an impact map for the training that they do. And the impact map basically is it's a map that shows what are you going to learn? That is, what are the learning outcomes?
Right.
What are the application expectations? What are the application? There it is, the 4 columns. Yeah. What are you going to learn?
Right.
How are you going to use it in your work? What results will improve if you do use it? And how do those results contribute to a business goal? And so it basically presents the value proposition for the training, and it makes it explicit. And this is where instructional design thinking has gotten us in trouble as a profession, because what people always say, oh, you have to know what the learning outcomes are. We have to have learning objectives. And so the training, if you look at most corporate training catalogs, what they give you is the name of the training, how long it will last, and when it takes place. It doesn't say anything about the why of the training. It says it's the how of the training. So it's no wonder that people don't know what the why is, because the learning and development department doesn't explain the why. So we've worked with learning and development departments where they throw away their old catalog, and now for every training there is an impact map. It shows how does this training make a difference to our market share? How is this training expected to make a difference to our employee retention? How is this training expected to make a difference to our profitability? So every training has an impact map that shows, here are the learning outcomes, here are the expectations for using it in work on the job place, here are the results that this should improve, and that should be unit by unit results. There has to be an impact map that shows how would this training be used in the research and development division, how would this be used in legal, how would this be used in HR, how would this be used in production. We have to show how the training is intended to be used. And that's what the impact map does. It gets it down on one page, so the value proposition of the training is clear. Now, that begins to reshape people's mental model about what the training is. And we've discovered that now the company I'm working with, we changed the name from an impact map to a performance path. What's the performance path? How does this training get turned into performance, get turned into results, get turned into contribution to business goals? But all of that has to be made clear. And of course, it never is made clear. And until it's made clear, we can't expect people to understand it. So the impact map has just become a very powerful tool for clarifying expectations of training, communicating them to senior leadership, making the business case always for the training. So it's basically, how can I make the value proposition of this training clear to you as a learner? I have to show you how it's going to change, how it can change your work, how it can change the results you're accountable for, and how it will help your manager become more accountable for the results that you're going to produce. So very important.
And those results are quantifiable results, right?
They should be, yeah. Yep.
Though in numbers, that's just you said in that example that 15% customer satisfaction ratio increase. Something like that, right?
Yeah.
So that's very powerful. Just to let you know that this book is in Chinese. This 10 years of work that my partner and I, it's called the Logic of Management. That's what we wrote in Chinese. We had some English literature, some portion of it, English version of it, but not available in English yet, but will be. So
good.
I was perplexed by, after I got this book, I read this book and all in and out in training while I was working for, U.S. West, and while I was in the States, and then Quest. And
Yeah.
then moved back to China. I worked for Hay Group. I worked for Ericsson. Worked for IBM. I was overseeing IBM's Greater
Yeah.
China training for a couple of years. That was my last job, a very good job. But I was always perplexed by the value of training. How do we create a value, and how do we identify or even calculate the
Yes.
value of training? And the impact map is one of the solutions. But my partner and I, we met in 10 years, 11 years ago, 2009. And ever since we started to work together went above beyond. We came out of training. He was a training professional as well, but we went above training and then went into management, trying to figure out what management should be. So that's why we wrote this book after 10 years of research. And this impact map is so similar to our driver equation.
Yes.
Driver equation is or we call it driver formula, is like the sales amount equals the number of customer, number of deals times number of deals per customer, and number of average contract. I mean the value of average contracts. So those are the three drivers. That's the level one, and then you can break it down to different levels.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are the impact. What do you call their impacts? Impact factors, but we call them drivers, not instead of influencers.
Well, that's a good way to think about them, as drivers of performance. I mean, it would be, any company. If we said to a company back before computers were just part of work, but when PCs were first being introduced, if I were trying to sell the Upjohn company on personal computers. I would be expected to, I wouldn't just say learning outcomes. I would be expected to make a business case to my customer for how are these computers going to be used, and how are they going to change the results in your company. And so we're required to do that with capital expenditures. We're required to show what's the logic of the return on investment. But training, we never got sold that way. People, if they were selling training, they said, well, gosh, look at our materials. They're really nice. We have a slot. Every trainee gets a notebook, and right here there's a slot where they can put their disc, and it clicks in, and it's got nice graphics throughout it. We sell all the features as a training, but none of the benefits. But so we have to learn how to sell and manage training the same way we would sell any technology. That we're going to have to show how can it make a difference to your business. And if we can't explain how it makes a difference to your business, we have no business trying to sell it. So I think, learning and development people have to learn how to become value proposition sellers. They have to be able to make the business case for the training they're trying to sell. So my first question, George, I love the training you're proposing. Tell me, how is that going to help our market share? And if you can't answer that question for me, we don't need to talk anymore.
Right. That's one of the CEOs, the CXO's question, and I'm involved in this, and tell me the results, and get Jerry Maguire's show me the money.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Show me the money. Yeah. The question is on the high-level impact, the process that you have analyzed. You kind of shortened it for the instructional design. You have the cycle, analyze, design, and create and try out, and then it's a spiral. It's a cycle.
Sure.
So it's a cycle, and also in the chart that you demonstrated is from inside out. It's almost a spiral, and that reminds me in instructional design there is a spiral model. It's from with the product development, and you develop it. There is a spiral model. So are they? If we talk about HIL, high impact learning, so are these the three critical steps: analyze, design, and create and try out?
Well, I think at a general level, yeah, I think they are. But I would operationalize them a little bit differently. I would say the first thing we need to do is clarify the business case for the training.
Right.
that we have to say, and then the next thing we have to do is break that business case down to a unit level in an organization, because the way that let's say that the training we're thinking about doing is conflict resolution. How will conflict resolution be used by our research scientists? How will conflict resolution be used by our salespeople? How will conflict resolution be used by our legal teams? People will use that training differently in each of those, depending on what they're accountable for and their work. So, and maybe that's sort of the parallel of the analysis now. What I have to do is I have to make the business case for each and every individual learner and each individual trainee. And once I understand how the training, if it worked, could make a difference, now I can begin to design the training. But I have to do that. I have to understand the business rationale, the logic for the training. How can this training drive a change that's worth making? So that analysis phase has to precede design, because obviously I'm going to design exercises and materials for how people will be expected to use this training, and that will be different in each and every sort of function of the company. So I'd say it's a similar process, but I would just use different language to describe that. Yeah. Yeah.
Of course, in the book, you describe it in much more detail. There's a lot of operational steps in it. I just want you to describe for our audience, because our audience may not be very familiar with. It's probably majority of them will be their first time to hear about high impact learning, and it's a very succinct, straightforward, and simple, but very legible process. And strictly focused on performance and performance-oriented design model, if I may say.
Yeah.
It is. So.
Yeah, I think, and that's the key to. We have to look at this through a behavior change performance lens, not through a learning lens. Yep.
Exactly through a performance lens, and that is very, very important just to our audience, and that's very, very important through look at the training through the performance lens. And that is that how you also went up to high performance learning, because there is also the term high performance learning there. And
well, yeah, and what the work I've been doing most recently is even before we got into this pandemic, there's definitely been a shift toward virtual learning, online learning.
Right.
And so the work I've been doing much more recently is how do we take high impact learning into the virtual world? Because high impact learning was developed really 30 years ago, when training was principally an event, when training was like a 2-day workshop, a 3-day workshop. And now training is going to be broken up into bits and pieces and delivered in bite-sized elements over time. How do we design training for the virtual world that will still reflect all the principles of high impact learning? And that's a real challenge, because most of the online training that's getting done nowadays is taking our content from a 3-day workshop and breaking it up into half-hour pieces and then streaming them out over time. So, and that's exactly the wrong way to look at it. We need to, and that's looking at it as a content delivery challenge versus a behavior change challenge. So what the new work we've been doing is how do we look at the design, how do we design training so that it's done from a performance change point of view and a performance improvement point of view versus a content delivery point of view. And what that says is that we will change the balance of our work. Typically, 80%. Like here's an example. In a 3-day workshop, we might spend 3 days training people how to do conflict resolution, let's say, or how to do situational leadership, and then and the last half hour of the 3 days will say, oh, before you go, let's everybody do an action plan and talk about how you're going to use this in your work when you get back to work next week. So a half an hour out of 3 days was dedicated to the action plan. What we do in the online training is we're going to flip that balance all the way around. That only about 10% of the learning is going to be focused on content and new methodologies. 90% of the process is going to be about practice with feedback and practicing the skills in bits and pieces, breaking the skills down into smaller bits, getting people to practice them in a safe environment, and gradually ramping up the challenge until people are ready to practice it in a real world environment. And that means we're stretching out the performance change process into a performance, what I call a high performance learning formula versus just how do we stream more content. The virtual world also already has more content than anybody could ever master. We don't need any more content. What we need is to engineer a learning path for people to apply that content in ways that will fit their job. So it's all about how do we build in practice and feedback and manager engagement into the virtual world. That's the challenge. We've got to figure out how to do that. And that's what I've been working on the last 4 years or so. So we don't have high impact learning now. The more recent book is this. It's called Improving Performance Through Learning. Like how do we get into that virtual world? And we're still taking all the same high impact learning concepts. We're just talking about how do we embed them in a design? How do we design learning in the virtual world that reflects all the principles of the before and after? And we have to now put that into one seamless process.
You know, Rob, in recent years, especially after Web 2.0, if you remember, the Web 2.0 movement that really generates waves of impacts. And then I see the world is the process of decentralization.
Yes.
The word decentralization start to dominate, such as blockchain is built upon the concept of decentralization, and also Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin, and also virtual currencies, and now in the old traditional way of learning and training, sit in the classroom and then do the whole block 3 day, and then you just do now, as you just described that right now, that the high performance learning is divide them into smaller pieces, like the micro learning courses or micro training, but strictly pinpoint to different behavioral changes, and then you teach them, and then exercise, and teach them exercise feedback, teach them exercise and feedback, all those smaller. So it's composed instead of one huge block of holistic, heavy design, heavily loaded contents, but you divide them in smaller pieces and different pieces so that it's easier and more kind of agile for flexibility, a lot of more flexibility to apply on the job. So on the go.
Well, you're using exactly the right language to describe that, George, because it's interesting. We've been, just recently, we've been looking at the concept of mass customization.
That's right.
And how does mass customization apply to? And so my son-in-law, for example, works for the Levi's Corporation, which makes blue jeans, Levi's. Blue jeans.
I'm wearing it today.
Well, they have mass customization. It's interesting. He was in charge of a new project that was employing mass customization, which is how do we move the point of customization closest to the point of the consumer. So here's the example that Levi's use, quite a fascinating process, and I'm going to give you another one. But at Levi's, what they do is, people like to have a pair of jeans that they customize. So, and they like they want the little, like, I want to have little rips up here on my pockets. I want to have a faded part here. So what Levi's does is they create what they call blank, Levi's blank. So it's just a generic genes, and those are shipped out to the stores. Then each of the store has a laser process. So if you go into the Levi store, you'll say, I want a pair of jeans that look like this. You'll sit at a computer in a laptop in the store, and you'll design the jeans you want the way you want them. You'll have, I want wear points on the pocket here. I want a tear down the side. You design it the way you want to look at it. When you've got it designed the way you want, they say, okay, George, go next door to the Starbucks and have a cup of coffee and come back in 40 minutes and your blue jeans will be ready. Because what they do is in the back of the shop now, they take that blank pair of blue jeans and they take the design you created, and the software now takes a laser and it burns those wear marks and everything into the jeans exactly the way. So now it's a pair of jeans that is unique. You the customer designed them. So the other approach to mass customization would be to have a catalog with 50 different styles of rips and tears in it, and have you, the customer, how to go through there and find one that you liked and then order it. And that would require Levi's to have all of those in stock and a huge inventory of them. Now they just make one simple, it's like Lay's potato chips. They make one blank potato chip. And if you want it with salt and vinegar or you want it with hot pepper, they spray on that flavor at the end of the process and put it in a bag. So we've said, how can we take mass customization principles and apply them to learning and development? Now, let me tell you a quick little story, very fascinating. I live in a little village in rural Michigan. 15 miles away from here is the Kellogg Experimental Dairy. It's run by Michigan State University. And it's a dairy farm with 200 cows. Now, the typical dairy farm, all the cows get fed at the same time, and they get fed the same food, and they get milked at the same time. They get milked in the morning, and they get milked again at night. And it requires a lot of labor. And that's why dairy farming is such a difficult job, because you got to get up early in the morning to milk the cows, and you got to milk them again in the evening. And why are they milked in the morning and the evening? Because that's when it's convenient for the farmer to do it. So that's what, now at this experimental dairy farm, there's only one farmer. They don't have any more than that. And the cows are free to come and eat whenever they want, and they're free to get milked whenever they want. Each cow wears a necklace with a computer chip on it. So when cow number one goes to get food, they stick their head into a feeding stall. The computer reads their chip, and it's been tracking their milk production, and it feeds them a blend of oats and wheat and other nutrients that are unique to that individual cow that will drive its performance. Now, on the performance side, when that cow feels like getting milked, they then walk over to the robotic milking station. And again, as they step into the milking station, the computer reads their chip and it milks them. And now it tracks their production, and it analyzes their production on a daily basis, their performance, the nutritional quality of milk, the amount of the milk, etc. And then that data gets fed to the feeding operation, and it constantly adjusts their feed to each individual cow. So now the cows do not eat, each cow has an individual diet. Each cow's production is tracked individually, and their diet is adjusted on a daily basis depending on their production. And now, only because the robots milk the cows, one person can run the whole operation. The cows get milked whenever they feel like getting milk. They eat when they feel like getting food. And the production is now 70% greater at that dairy farm, and the labor has been reduced by about 80%. So you can imagine what that's doing to profitability. So what we said is, how can we take that dairy farm model and apply it to learning and development? And here's the important distinction. We have so-called mass customization now in learning and development, but it's based on the learner's preferences rather than their performance needs. So importantly, the dairy operation does not ask the cow. I do not say, so Bessie the cow, what do you feel like eating today? Would you rather have oats, or do you feel like some hay? You had a lot of hay yesterday. Maybe some alfalfa would be good today. Here's our off-rated food. What would you like to have today? And that's how the learner's world is. We have, George, here's a cafeteria of learning options and preferences. You can learn by video. You can learn by practice. You can learn by live instruction, asynchronous. What do you feel like learning today? What would be most interesting to you? And that's how, and all these algorithms like for YouTube and for Netflix, they're based on your preferences, not your performance drive. Importantly, the cow doesn't get asked what they feel like eating. They get fed based on what will maximize their performance. And so how do we take that model and figure out a learning diet that will increase each individual's performance? And that's what the new improving performance through learning is about. We've taken that mass customization model and said, how would we apply that to learning? How do I adjust your learning diet to match your performance needs? And so obviously we need to think about this as a performance change process, not a learning preference process. We don't want to customize the learning. We want to customize the performance application of the learning and personalize. So we talk about not personalized learning, but personalized performance improvement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
At an individual level, right?
Yeah, at an individual level. That's right.
But the mechanism is called the mass customization.
That's right. Yeah. Why do we train people in groups? That's driven simply by economics. I mean, obviously, if we were serious about training we would hire each and every employee an individual learning coach. Can't possibly afford to do that. You can't have each person has a learning coach that follows them around and says, George, how you doing? You could do that a little differently today. If you tried this, have you thought of that?
That would
nice. Work, but we need 15,000 coaches for 15,000 employees. So our approach to learning and development has been to train people in groups or in MOOCs, even worse yet, try to reduce our costs. But we reduce our costs, we reduce our impact. So we have to learn how to mass customize the performance formula, not the learning formula. And that's what the new work is about. And I think it's going to dramatically change our learning and development world.
Yeah, it dramatically changes to me is a new learning as well. It's dramatically change the fundamental basic concepts of learning in mass format. Yes. But this one is more pinpoint to the individual level. But my question is, does the impact of the learning through high performance and your new methodology, does that require a lot of high tech support? Because let me, Rob, yes. Let me take up a little bit of that question. Because in one of the books that you have the low, synchronous, asynchronous, and then high impact, low tech, high impact, that quadrant. And the other way is I'm asking is when you describe that new methodology is fascinating. First of all, secondly, it reminds me to think of the old world, the reusable learning objects, the modularization, the LCMS, LMS era, and those things. So come back to the question: does that require high tech support?
And I would say the answer to that is, for most practical applications, yes, but not necessarily. Now, for example, executive education, where we're training smaller groups of people, I think that can be done. We can design high performance virtual learning for very small groups of people without a lot of high technology. But now, if we want to take that approach and apply it globally to 3,000 employees, yes, we'll need what is called a learning experience platform, what Josh Bersin calls learning experience platforms. These are not LMSs. LMSs are basically warehouses full of content where people can try to access it based on their preferences. The learning experience platform is a way of delivering an individual performance improvement process that's mass customized by the learner. And these learning experience platforms allow that. They enable that. So I'm working with a company in Sweden now called Promote International. They basically read the same book you read, High Impact Learning. They came and heard me speak over 10 years. They decided to take everything I developed in High Impact Learning and build a software platform to deliver that. So they've been ahead of the field, but there's probably now about a dozen of these learning experience platforms in the marketplace, and they really make the job of high impact learning in the virtual world easier, and they make it scalable. But
Okay.
they still require three things to make them work, and those three things are design, and design.
Design.
Okay. Yeah, because we evaluated a bunch of programs that were using wonderful technology, but they were lousy programs, poor designs.
Yeah.
So you can take a poor design and mount it in a powerful platform, and what you have is powerfully delivered bad training.
Yeah, garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. So what we studied, Promote International has they have several hundred licensees around the world who are using their platform. We have been evaluating their programs and looking at how are the clients using the platform to get results. And as we expect, some are getting great results, some are not getting great results. The difference is the design.
Yeah.
We're working now with Kevin Ford is at Michigan State University, and he's probably the premier researcher on training transfer. It has been for the last 30 years. He is an outstanding researcher. He's beginning to work with us, looking at some of these Promote platform users to try to understand what are the critical design elements that go into making training work. So the latest book we have out now is taking all of those learnings, looking at, because we studied a bunch of the high-tech programs that don't work as well as those that do work, and identified what are the differences and how do you, so it still means you have to design differently, but it's different from designing event-based learning. You have to be designing for these, to optimize these virtual platforms.
The design for performance actually is a
yes.
direct.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I'd put it. It's designing for performance, and it's designing for personalized performance improvement using mass customization principles. But yeah, short answer to your question is yes. We really have to learn how to leverage these technology platforms.
Right. Now, I would summarize it: mass customization at individual level.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you move the customization as close as you can to the customer's value transaction. So that's what Levi's has done. They've taken it right to the point of purchase. So we want to take, for us, it's not the point of purchase, it's the point of application. So you've been taking this course in conflict resolution. How can we help you use it well now in your first experience with a real conflict scenario? And that's so now we're going to personalize that. If we know in general what your job is and how you might make use of conflict resolution, we can then say that's our application goal for 2 months from now. And now let's back that up and start designing practice applications for you that lead toward what we call that moment that matters. The moment that matters is when you try, when you're in a make or break situation. If you resolve this conflict effectively, you will succeed and your company will be more productive, or whatever conflict you're addressing. That's the moment that matters, is the point at which you use this in a real part of your job. If we can identify those moments that matter, and they're different for every individual. So part of our technology is helping people identify the moments that matter in their jobs. Where, I have to say, in all the things you do, George, let's imagine that you're using conflict. where in your job, when and where, in what circumstance would using conflict resolution skills help your unit improve market share? And that's those are the moments that matter for you, that will drive a business result. It's sort of the intersection of your work with the needs of the business, and
Right.
that intersects at what we call a moment that matters, and that's where we want to personalize your learning.
So on the back, if there's a computer chip on the chip, it must be the impact map that.
I think, yeah, that's exactly right. What you're going to do is, once you stick your head into this training,
Right.
it's going to start engaging you in a process of creating an individual impact map.
Great.
Yeah.
Do you? So I'm assuming that I haven't seen that promote platform, but I saw it on Google and earlier on when I did the research during the past week.
Yes.
Because every interviewer before I do that, 10 days before prior, I come into your world and there's just study a lot of your achievements and major works, and it pop up the promote. But I'm sure that on the platform there must be some EPSS or PSS components in it, the performance support.
Yes. Yeah. The platform doesn't actually contain those EPSS tools, but it has places where you can create them and plug them into the process. So
it's embedded in. Is not a
exactly.
Or is that separate system or separate link to it, or just naturally built in?
It would depend. I mean, we would if you have if your work already has an EPSS, a performance support system and tool, we would want to make sure that the Promote platform can speak to that and engage with it and leverage it for your work. But yes, the learning designers might be creating some performance support tools as they go, some job aids, for instance, and they may be electronic job aids that would be embedded into the process. Absolutely.
Does a new platform, new ways of, based on the mass production, mass customization, does it also have the just-in-time training, the JITT components in it?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that the delivery system has to match the context of the learner. So
of course,
if you're a delivery driver for Fed Express and you spend most of your working hours sitting behind a wheel of your car, that's different from a person who's a counselor and who sits in an office interacting with people. I mean, so we have to understand your work context to be able to design the training that fits that. So yeah, it has to be, the more it can be just in time, just enough, the better it is. Yeah.
Better it is, exactly.
And nobody will know what is just enough and what's just in time better than each individual performer.
Exactly.
So we're going to give you the power to define, you, the individual performer, we're going to give you the power to define what's just enough for you. Because what's just enough for you might not be nowhere near just enough for me.
Right.
And what might be just in time for you won't be just in time for me.
So it is a matter of a realization of decentralization in the learning.
Totally.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Decentralizing it to each individual performer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And giving them a digital channel to the wealth of performance support and knowledge there is available to them. But understand, it's way more than content delivery. It's going to be, this performance support process is going to manage your practice. You're going to practice with these skills, and you'll be getting feedback. So it's just, now when you do those practice sessions are up to you. You may decide to do them when you're stuck in traffic at a traffic light. You may decide to do them, like I know you're doing this interview at night when your 9-month-old is asleep. So sure. You're gonna decide what's just enough and what's just in time for you.
Right.
Yeah.
So flexibility, just in time, on the job, informal learning, social learning, all that action learning, micro learning, all the concept you're kind of build them into one, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
into one.
Now, speaking, George, of just enough, just in time, I have to be looking at my clock as well here,
I know.
because I have to run to an appointment relatively soon here. So,
Okay.
uh,
How about we switch gear to the SCM success case method, and then I'll ask you the follow-up question, then closing questions.
sure, sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, success case method is, you know, I've been trained as an evaluator. I still do evaluation work. I run a little Brinkerhoff Evaluation Institute. We do evaluation studies for companies
The
all around
BEI.
the globe using the success case method. And success case method was, frankly, I developed because when I was trying to do evaluation in
Right.
companies real time, I realized I can't do, I took graduate level courses in research design and research methodology and how to do double blind studies. You can't do that stuff in the real world. We needed to find a practical, quick method that we could get get enough information to help people improve a program. So that's why we developed the success case method. We said, look, I know for any training program, you put 100 people through training, there's probably going to be 20 or 30 of them who are using that training and getting great results with it. So if I can identify who those 20 or 30 are, why don't I just study them rather than try to figure out, on average, I already know your training is mediocre. That's a given because some people use it, some don't. So on average, and most research models have us always looking at the average performance, the mean, the arithmetic mean. And we said, I don't care about the average performance. I want to know when it works, why does it work? And when it doesn't work, why doesn't it work? So success case method, we quickly survey a group of trainees and identify who are the 10 or 15% who didn't do anything with the training, and who are the 10 or 15% who did great stuff with the training. And let's drill down into their experience and learn quickly what we need to know to make this training work better. So how can we take, if 15 people out of used it last week, how can I get that be 20 people next week? How can I get 20 people to use it as well as the top 10%? And so it's a very efficient method of doing evaluation quickly and getting data that is actionable that you can use to improve training programs.
So
It's a simple formula. We say, when it works, notice and nurture. When it doesn't work, notice and repair.
And change. Yeah.
That's it.
Got it. So amplify the good and change and amend the one that need to be.
That's right. Yeah.
The better ones.
Yeah. So it's basically a learning model. You know, it's like we learn from the exemplary performer and we try to get the average performers to perform more like the exemplary performers. So we just study those exemplary performers and figure out, and the other people, what are the obstacles they're facing. What I would encourage people to do is everything you do is a pilot. So all the work you do is a pilot, and look at it that way. You know that some of it's going to work and some of it isn't. So treat everything you do as a pilot and learn from your mistakes and expect mistakes. And if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. So I would say be humble. Understand you don't even know what all, you certainly don't have all the answers. You don't even know what all the questions are. So you have to expect to learn as you go and expect to grow as you go and keep that growing. I'm 79 years old. I'm still trying to figure out how to do this right. I don't have all the answers yet at all. And I never will, and nor will you, but we'll get better as we go. So let's have that realistic expectation. And the other thing I would say is raise the expectations for your customer. Listen to what your customer needs to do and help them expect you to help them improve. Training and development suffers from a culture of low expectation. Most companies just expect training to be okay and for people to not complain about it. No, help your customer raise their expectations, and help your customer say, don't expect me just to do a good job. Expect that your results will improve. And if I'm not helping you improve your results, then I'm not doing my job. I expect you to expect more from me. And by raising those expectations, you'll start living up to them, and your customers will value that.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
a great advices. Do you, last question, if you have a time, what if you had another chance to do it all over again, what would you have done differently?
Oh boy. You know, I would love to have 2 more. You see that guitar sitting behind me over on the sofa.
Yeah.
I'd love to have spent much more time playing music.
You're a music guy.
But I made it a hobby, not a vocation. I'd love to have another lifetime to live. I'm a builder. I design things. I do carpentry work. I'd love to have another lifetime to be an architect and a designer. So, you know, I would say build time into what I wish I'd done is build more time into my life to enjoy the things that are joyful to do, like playing music. I'm never as happy as I am when 2 or 3 friends come over and we sit on the porch and we play music together and sing harmonies, and all of a sudden it's 3 o'clock in the morning and we've drunk a half a case of beer and it's been a wonderful evening. So I would build more time into my life to enjoy those things. So for you, enjoy time to watch that little 9-month-old grow. So
thank you. Thank you.
To do it. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'm also an amateur guitar player. I'll take advice.
There you go. Well, great to talk to you. Thanks for setting up this opportunity, George. I value it. It's been good fun.
Thank you, Rob, and
You're
thank
welcome.
you for and have a good day. And we wish you well during the pandemic. Please stay safe and keep in touch. Thank you.
Same to you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. That's the end of my interview with Dr. Robert Brinkerhoff. Thank you, Rob, because for the nth time, I really learned a lot again. I started to hear about Rob Brinkerhoff's name about more than 20 years ago, but not until the year 2006, after I returned to China, did I get a chance to really get into one of his important works called this book called High Impact Learning, in which he had a very refreshing view on many models and many things in this field. For instance, the ADDIE model. And he said it's linear, but it's too linear, and it's got to be more efficient. It needs to be more efficient. And he said we need to have more effective ways to create more effective learning and performance experiences for our target audience. And that was 20 years ago. I mean, this book was published 20 years ago. His high impact learning laid a solid foundation for his later work, which is more recent, called high performance learning, which we hope that in the future we'll have more chance to learn from him about. So on behalf of all the viewers, Rob, thank you again. The reason I mentioned the ADDIE model, the ADDIE model, is because the guest we're going to interview next week has a lot to do with it. You probably never heard his name, but if I mention one of his works, you'll probably very soon recognize him. Yes, he is the creator, the main creator of the ADDIE model, the ADDIE model. His name is Dr. Robert Brinson, Bob Brinson. Bob is the main creator, main thinker, and contributor to the establishment of the ADDIE model. But the ADDIE model, at the very beginning, was never meant to be ADDIE model. It was meant to be, it was ADDIC model, with the letter C at the very end, meaning control. So ADDIE was ADDIC at the very beginning, but how did it become ADDIE? How ADDIC become Eddie. Let's give the floor to Dr. Brenson to tell us all the story behind it from a couple decades ago. So until next Wednesday, stay tuned. Thank you and good night.